Good day, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 88. As always, I'm going to start us off with some music. Always, every time. Save our gracious Queen, glory our Lord Queen, God save the Queen. Victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us, God save the Queen. Okay, that was, of course, God Save the Queen, and that's probably one of the last times you're going to hear that particular version, because it will be God Save the King from now on. Of course, I played that in tribute to Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. We have a policy on this channel that we're not going to do political discussions about the late Queen until after her funeral, which I believe is going to be on the 19th. So we won't be talking about the Queen and politics this week. Instead, our main topic is going to be about in-group and out-group preference, and why so many Anglo-Celtic people and European and European descent white people around the world seem to be so lacking in this vital human trait. Adaman, how are you going, mate?
Yeah, could you?
Yeah, no, I'm very good. I'm very good. I'm obviously a bit sad about the death of the Queen. End of an era, however you look at it. But as I said, I don't really want to talk about the political side of her reign until after at least she's been buried, out of respect. We won't be doing that. Did you have a first topic that you wanted to bring up this week, Adaman, at all?
No, I'm actually pretty empty on that end.
All right, because there's to be honest with you, I was looking at the news earlier, and obviously like 99% of it is about the death of the Queen. And a lot of the foreign news as well. I will say I think some of the statements being issued by lefties and people of third world backgrounds have been absolutely disgusting, and those people have been showing their true colours. This sort of stuff was coming out before the poor old lady was cold, even,
Yeah.
So not in favour of that at all. I'm not any sort of Republican. I'm a monarchist, and I'm certainly prepared to give King Charles III a chance and see what he's going to do. Can't say I'm optimistic, but we will see.
Mm.
Anyway, in-group and out-group preferences. It is a natural human trait, because we are a tribal animal, to have in-group preferences and to be at least wary of outside groups. And it seems to me that of all the peoples on the earth, the white European or European descent people seem to be the people who have this the least. And I'm wondering, what's your take on that, Adam?
I was actually thinking about this over the last sort of week, and I actually scored some notes on like some tissues. It's a toughie. I mean, I'm not sure if I totally accept this idea that Europeans. Well, actually, no, it is true. Europeans probably do have the least in-group preference, but I don't think, like, a lot of people seem to be implying it's close to non-existent, and I don't think that's true. I think it's dormant. It's below the surface. I mean, Jared Taylor has this point where he says in migration and mating patterns, like the average sort of liberal is indistinguishable from the KKK. And there's sort of an aspect to which, how would you put it? People will say what they need to say to sort of largely stay within the tribe, but tribe in the literal sense, not tribe in like, a sense of that tribe. But they won't. But they still act very much within their actual nature. And of course this is like your stated versus revealed preference and things like that. But there are of course studies though that have been done. I mean, I actually had some on my computer because I did, I covered this in a video on my own YouTube channel ages ago, which I didn't probably cover it as well as I probably should have. But there was a study in America some years ago called it was like in 2018, I think it was, and they called it the hang on, I'm just trying to find it on here somewhere. I'm sure I've got it somewhere. It was like the 2018 pilot study or something. They refer to it as, and they broadly showed that that when you actually measure in-group preference, though that for whites they split it in half. They took like left-leaning people and right-leaning people, and right-leaning people had in-group preference not that far below anyone else, and left-leaning people had actually negative in-group preference. They actually had an out-group preference. And on that note as well, there's a really good video by Sean Last, which people can go and check out. I can't remember the exact name, but if you look for like a video that he's made with like biases in the name or something like that, you should be able to find it, where he covers a study. And it's quite an interesting study because they basically lay out a hypothetical, and it's like a trolley car problem, one of those ones where you can kill one person or you can kill a group of people, and essentially it's like, would you kill Chip to save the New York or Bronx jazz band or whatever it is, or would you kill Tyrone to save the Philharmonic Orchestra? And they don't mention race in this at all, but of course it's assumed, right? People assume Chip is white and Tyrone is black, and that the jazz orchestra and that the jazz group is largely black, and that the Philharmonic Orchestra is largely white. And when they ask the conservatives, they always go for like saving the group over the individual, which is, I suppose, like pragmatic. But when they ask the liberals, like the lefties, and they say like, oh, would you kill Tyrone to save the Philharmonic Orchestra? And suddenly they're like, well, maybe, and it's, all the sort of anti-white biases sort of come out.
Yep. No, I agree. As Dosastic Draco said in the chat, it's the runaway trolleybus idea, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Sean Last is the dude who used to do stuff with alternative hypotheses, isn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, and he has certainly got a channel on YouTube, and I dare say he's probably on Odyssey or one of these other places.
Yeah. I think this was definitely a YouTube video. George has, I think, posted the link to it in chat.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah, people can click on and watch that afterwards. It's an interesting video. He covers a whole range of studies in that about this sort of issue.
Cool. Well, worth going and checking it out. I think a lot of it is down to the education system, particularly the state education system. I think children from nursery school right up through primary school and secondary, comprehensive school, whatever they call them these days, and then right up through university are just constantly bombarded with an anti-white narrative, pretty much.
Yeah.
And especially an anti-straight white male narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I don't actually think, again, I think it is a difference between stated and revealed preferences. I think it was the HP, the zero HP Lovecraft guy, the guy who's still around, right, under the alias, who's on Twitter and stuff, and he writes like short stories and fiction and stuff. And I think he once said, like, if he could gain the levers of power of the media, he would have like most of these blue haired types seek hiling like by the end of the month. Which is probably not, you know, the best analogy for sort of our beliefs and ideas, but I do actually think that that's kind of true. You know, if I could get if I could get my hands on the BBC for a month, and I could, like, you know, do a Strange Death of Europe TV show and various other stuff, I think I could do a lot of damage to the regime's sort of coercive hold over people, based on breaking this sort of cover on white in-group preference or British in-group preference.
Yeah, look, I also wonder how many people don't believe this stuff at all, but just keep the trap shut, basically, to avoid running afoul of the various hate speech laws and all the lefty bullshit which has been piled on us over the last 30, 40 years now. I think there's a lot of people who do still have a genuine in-group preference, but it's like it's almost unacceptable to say so.
Yeah, like 100%. I mean, that's the issue. Like, people, like, white flight's still a thing, right? Like, you know, people might coach it behind all this language, and they'll say like good and bad neighborhoods, and you got to kind of think, well, how do you know what a good and bad neighborhood is? Deep down, they know what a good neighborhood is by looking at it, but they don't. They don't say it, and they don't actually consciously see it, but they do unconsciously see it.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, Raw Biscuits in the chat. I always find the Liberals, despite saying that they want a multicultural paradise, they always seem to move to homogeneous rural British villages. I don't know why. Yes, I think there's quite a lot of truth in that. Quite a lot of truth in that.
Yeah. I mean, I live in one of these lovely rural villages, and there's quite a few around here. Some DFLs down from London's.
Yeah.
You know, and they do sort of take over the area, and you know, like, there's like a grown woman in my village that got arrested for an Extinction Rebellion protest where she was like graffiti and stuff. She's like in her 40s for one, but it's also just like, she doesn't, like, people around here don't have any respect for her. They actually really look down on her because she is like one of these liberal-minded aliens that people know isn't really at home in this community. But you know, they don't seem to. First off, people don't speak up. People are too afraid of offending people. They're still in this sort of mid-century mindset that they you know, that they think that that they can actually just keep quiet and keep to themselves, and nothing's actually going to go downhill from it. You know, a lot of people don't realize that we're now in this sort of existential situation where this is actually an issue, where you need to actually start taking some sort of stand, or you're going to start seeing real issues, you know, in your community, real decline.
Yeah, I totally agree. People have to start I think, you've got to strike a balance between lengthening the Overton window and going completely off the scale. There are some things that if you say them, you're just going to get yourself into trouble for no great purpose. But certainly, I think we can speak up in the way that we are on this stream now, and just to point out, in-group preferences are not a bad thing. In fact, they're quite vital for the human race, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, I listened to a clip of Bowden earlier because I said I'd been trying to make a Bowden TikTok to introduce Jonathan Bowden to the Zoomers, and so I've been going through clips of him, and yeah, there's one particular funny one where he's saying about like discrimination, and he's saying like you discriminate on like the food you eat, and you discriminate about like what slice of cake to take, and everything is a form of discrimination, and yet on this one facet, people have been like terrified out of the idea of mentioning it. Yeah, but like George just said there, he says like it's low crime and has a fantastic. The funny thing is most of the people, and I've actually had this conversation with people where they say like, oh, it's peaceful and low crime, and I'm like, right, but you came in, you viewed the house once, and then you bought it. Like you didn't actually go into the village, you didn't really take a look around. How do you know it's low crime? How do you know it's this? How do you know that our local supermarket doesn't need, the coin slots on the trolleys, right? Because they didn't go there, they didn't look, but but somehow they do know.
It's got nothing to do with the ethnic makeup of the place at all.
Yeah. I mean, inherently, unconsciously, they're seeing people that look like them, and there's a trust there that they don't even account for, but it's there.
Yeah, look, this is true. But there again, you watch just about every TV series you can name. You watch just about every modern film you can name. You watch just about every TV advert that you can think of. And diversity is just shoved down your throat constantly. And there is an underlying anti-white and specifically anti-straight white male narrative in all of it. I mean, we even saw this with the Prime Minister Truss. Everyone, including so-called conservatives in inverted commas, saying, "Oh, there are no straight white men in the cabinet. How wonderful!"
Yeah,
it's just I don't know. And this is in a country which is more than 80% white.
Well, maybe it's probably teetering on the edge, but
yeah, it was 87%, I think, wasn't it? Of the last,
I think it was something like that, 85, 86, something like that. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so let us hope it's 80%, but I mean that's probably as high as we can hope for, I guess. Given that all of the British political parties are in favour of mass immigration all the time.
I think 2 years ago I sat down with a pad and I did like some rudimentary calculations, and the what I came to was about 74 to 75% white British and sort of 80-ish%, sort of like bang on 80% white. So I'm still waiting for the data. I could be well off because it has changed a little bit, in that time.
Yeah. I mean, just last year the Conservatives let in virtually 1 million immigrants into the UK.
It was 1.6 million total visas. I think it was 1.1 that were either students or permanent.
Yeah, and of course, there's no saying that many of those people who come over on non-permanent visas don't stay illegally after their visa winds up, as many of them do.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, people will talk about like illegal immigrants, like the ingress of illegal immigrants. Student visas are the biggest entry point for that. It's the same when you see these scammers ringing up all the old ladies and that.
Yeah.
And they'll often say like, well, they're foreign, they're phoning from abroad. Half the time they are actually in the UK. They'll be students or something similar.
Yeah.
And they'll be like recruited through an internal, an in-group internal sort of thing, like a community thing, maybe connections and so forth through either social media or otherwise. And they'll get these jobs that are either cash in hand or kind of largely off the books in one way or another in these sorts of built up call centers.
Yeah, I mean, so like everyone assumes these people, like the scammers, etc., are in New Delhi or wherever it might be. But yeah, I'm sure you're right about that.
I mean, I'm sure there are still quite a lot in New Delhi too. But
Oh yeah, and Nigeria, of course. But,
all those princes over there. They've got to give their money to someone.
Yes, they're just desperate to give away cash in Nigeria. But believe that, and you'll believe, I've got a bridge to sell you.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is though, it isn't. People get lulled in because they're like lonely, and that opens them up to gullibility and a bit of weakness.
Well, I don't know. There's not going to be much giving away of money these days, I don't think. With this upcoming winter, I think people are going to be struggling to pay their bills, never known, giving money away to Nigerian princes. But yeah, like I said, I think a lot of the seeming lack of in-group preference amongst white European descent people is definitely propaganda from the media and brainwashing at school and university. I don't think anyone can argue against that. And I mean, the lefties, who, as you said, tend to have an out-group preference, are actually mostly self-hating.
Yeah.
They don't like the fact that they're white. And they're somehow ashamed of it for whatever crazy, insane reason they may have,
I mean, when I was looking through TikTok, I was trying to find like what hashtags are the kids using, right? Like, how can I get my video sort of trending? And then I found so many videos, a lot of them by women, I will say, and they're saying stuff like, being white is not a race, because it's one of them literally said, like, being white is not a race, it's a genetic disorder, and we're not supposed to exist. That was like literally her words, and she's laughing while she's saying it, like mocking people that actually think it's a real thing, that think that being white's a real thing.
Yeah. Did you see the video that what's his name, the American news dude, the right-wing chap? Did you see the video he made on the British Empire?
Oh, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you?
Yeah.
When he was pointing out the all the stuff that Britain left behind in India, some of which was like physical and some of which was cultural. Like, that's my own view entirely. Like, I'm not ashamed of anything the British people have ever done, not at all. Because when we did do bad things, of course we did it. All human beings have done bad things, but when we did bad things, so everyone else was doing exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean there's another example of it. That's how quick, right, with a bit of rhetoric on the bloody TV, how quick you can re-imbue a people with in-group preference. Like he talked about the Great Replacement, like a grand total of 2 or 3 times, like hardly at all, and it was just immediately like a mainstream talking point in America. And of course half the country's trying to say it's not real, but a huge amount of them were basically just bought into it straight away. As soon as you crack the surface of that, and you can actually tell people they can talk about this, they talk about it, and suddenly that stuff that's kind of laid dormant underneath, they see. I mean, you'll know when we've won the in-group battle, right? If that's what you want to do, if you want to awaken, like if you want to actually turn whites into racists, right? Everything the left says they are, which is not actually something I want to do for a couple of reasons, but I'm not opposed to it if it means we can win. But you'll know when we've won that, because, like, for example, there were articles about the recent news, which I know you don't want to go into, but there are articles basically saying that the crowds at the Mall were awfully white, right, in a very negative connotation.
Although actually it's a positive connotation, but yes.
Yeah, well, they're I mean, it is positive, but they're trying to swing it as a negative. When the mass of people that read that article immediately turn around and say, yeah, but I bet there was less stabbings, muggings, and whatever than at the Notting Hill Carnival a couple of weeks earlier.
Yeah,
that's the response people have to that article. The first response, you'll know you've won when that's the way people respond to it.
Yeah, and I mean, look, when you have BAME people, assaulted black and brown people coming out on Twitter and what have you, and telling me, I hope Her Majesty died in sheer agony and blah blah. These people are just showing their true colours, if you'll pardon the pun. Yeah. They really are. They detest you. as a white person, and specifically as a straight white male. They absolutely detest you, and many of the people that do detest you are actually white themselves, and they're white women, a lot of them. Middle class lefty women, and obviously feminists, you know. But yeah, it's. I just think some of this has got to be seeping through to normies.
I don't know. I mean, I was quite black-pilled this week when people were more passionate about the recent news in a negative way because they don't like the monarchy than they were when I bring up, you know, Pakistani rape gangs at work.
Jesus. Yeah, that's a bit disappointing, isn't it? And were these British people?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't let them hire any non-whites at work.
I'm well, good on you. But I don't know. I think the majority of British people are not particularly, certainly weren't anti the Queen. Some people, I mean, obviously you're always going to get some people that are, but I would say most people weren't. I mean, I was much sadder than I thought it'd be when she died, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so was I actually. I was quite surprised with myself.
Yeah. I mean, however you look at it, it's the end of an era. That's without any doubt whatsoever. Things are going to be different now. Whether they'll be better or worse, well, time will tell. But I'm not overly optimistic, I have to say. So yeah, I just think I've seen people on the right having a go at Her Majesty and so on, and I just think that's totally shooting yourself in the foot. It really is. Don't do it. Don't support the leftists, whatever you do.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the recent news as it is, I think the dis right is better taking that age-old adage of if you've got nothing nice to say, just don't say anything at all. It's not as if there aren't valuable critiques to be made, but they don't have to be made right now. You know,
no.
Let the left make a fool of themselves. Let them make themselves look grotesque, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. You know.
Yeah, let's at least wait until after Her Majesty's funeral, which, as I say, I think he's on the 19th, which is going to be a bank holiday, I believe, in the UK.
Nice. Yeah, that's what I've heard. I think he's signed off on it.
I would imagine the British Armed Forces at the moment are struggling to get enough people for a full state funeral, given how weak they are these days. But yeah. What is George saying here? You'll never have more woken up normies than you have right now. If the countrywide possibility of a little girl being raped won't change, nothing will. Yeah, well, there's some truth in that. Yeah, there is some truth.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think there was a comment AA made a long time ago that really riled a lot of people up. I don't think it was AA actually. I think it was Charlemagne, but he was on AA's stream, right? And he said we don't need to be bringing people into the movement. We need to be working with what we've got. We need to be gatekeeping. And I know a lot of people got kind of the arse about that, but the more I think about it, the more I agree. I mean, there's enough people in the dis right generally, as a broad movement. There's more than enough people here. We've just got to, actually work with what we've got and start putting pen to paper and various other things.
Yeah, look, it's
yeah, and I'm not saying that if people get into it that we can't still have lines of entry, that you still have it as something that people can be welcomed into if they do the reading and
sure.
Various things. But it's just I don't think our goal should be going out there and drumming up, opening up the recruitment stands and
No, I agree with you. I don't think that's it, and I also quite like Jonathan Bowden's idea of a vanguard, but on the other hand, you do need to try and push back on that Overton window that the establishment is always trying to narrow.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I mean, if anything is going to happen electorally, and I'm the first to admit that's not going to be easy, but if anything's going to happen electorally, you do have to get a fair number of normies who are willing to shift from supporting the Conservative Party, for example, to an actual right of centre party.
Yeah.
And you've still got to get that large number of very small, mostly very small right of centre parties to stop fighting each other harder than they fight the establishment and the left. You know, it's a conundrum.
No. Yeah, basically.
So yeah, Lumbar saying 62 gun salutes might be challenging if we're all out of shells in the UK. Those are blanks, man. I have to tell you, the shells that they fire are blanks.
Well, you never know; they might have sent the guns over there when they go and check.
No, I did watch a video where they were doing it all around the country, basically all the British garrisons and naval base towns and all this kind of stuff. But all those shells are blank, so they're not much use anyway. But yeah. JB in the chat says a bunch of delusional anti-vaxxers and Putinistas won't achieve jack. First of all, I don't think the anti-vaxxers are delusional at all. I'm one myself. I've never been vaxxed. I've never even been tested for the China virus. So you won't get me on that one, JB. I think Putin's more right than wrong in Ukraine, to be honest with you. But again, that's me.
There's a point you made a minute ago that I had something to say about, but I can't remember what it is now. It was what we was just talking about, but it kind of reminded me of the in-group thing again.
Well, when Bowden was talking about vanguards, or
no, not that. I can't remember what it is. It'll come to me in a minute.
Yeah, I do that sometimes. I get distracted by something. But yeah, I do think it's an uphill battle, and this in-group and out-group thing, while it's not overtly political, I think it's one of the most vital things we should be teaching people now. Is that it's not wrong to favour your own ethnic group. It isn't, and all human beings of all races and types in the world do that. They just do. If you go to South Africa, you will find a Zulu favours a Zulu over a Xhosa. They just do. Or if you go to India, obviously you'll find a Sikh favours a Sikh over a Muslim. It's like it's entirely natural, and it happens in all parts of the world. It isn't anything to do with racism.
And it's not really to do with history, though, really, either, because a Sikh has a reason to dislike a Muslim, but even babies have been shown to have like a natural preference to people that share visual indicators that are similar to their own.
Yeah, absolutely correct. But I just think that this is one of the things that we can, because this is something you can teach normies about, and it isn't particularly political. There's no reason really why a Labour voter shouldn't have an in-group preference, and indeed many of them at least used to.
Most Labour voters still do. This is kind of the conundrum, is that I'm not sure if it's the majority now, but a huge subset of outside of this last election, a huge subset of Labour voters are socially right of even most Conservative MPs.
Yeah, absolutely true. You're talking about your traditional, what used to be called respectable working class people and so on.
Yeah. Like you could just say anyone that's, let's say, blue collar that votes for Labour.
Yeah.
And they do make up really. People scratch their heads, and like conservatives, right-wing conservatives will scratch their heads, who are still sort of caught in the party paradigm, and say, why do those people vote for the Tories? And it's like, well, why do those people vote for Labour? And it's like, well, they're not exactly going to vote for the Tories either, are they?
No.
Generally what you see there is that people that are slightly on the poorer side are going to naturally lean to, when neither party represents their views, they're going to naturally lean to a party that's a bit more left-wing economically. And as they get wealthier, they're going to start to lean towards a party that's a touch more right-wing economically.
I just think that in terms of Conservatives, if you are a Conservative voter, you've got to start looking at individual MPs, which is what you should be doing in the first place anyway, really, as John Cavalier would always remind people. But yeah, you should be looking at individual MPs, and there are, I don't know, 30, 40 actual conservative MPs. And by all means, if that is your MP, vote for them. But the rest of that party are not conservative. They're not even right of centre in any way, shape, or form. They're not even right of centre financially these days.
Mm.
If you look at the enormous debt that they've got us in now,
yeah,
and the latest things that they're doing with this energy stuff that they're going to do, is actually all it's doing is piling on debt for the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that might be better than more old age pensioners dying this coming winter from the cold, but it's not a long-term solution.
Mm.
And I mean, they've said, oh, well, maybe we'll legalise fracking. Okay, I'm not against that, but so long as local people agree to it, of course. I'd be in favour of opening a couple of really modern coal mines in Wales with as much automation as possible. Welsh coal is some of the best coal in the world. It's very clean burning as coal goes, and we still have lots of it. So I'd be in favour of doing that. And of course, you've got to start building nuclear power stations again. But none of that is going to solve anything in the next 5 years.
Did you see the little conversation me and Richard had in the Discord about fracking?
Yes, I saw some of it. I didn't see all of it. I didn't have a chance to read all of it because I was getting ready for this and putting out advertising for it and so on. But yeah, I did see some of it.
They think that, I mean, their report kind of indicates that maybe there's enough shale gas in Boland Shale to sort of power Britain for 50 years with quite a lot to spare.
Wow. That's more than I thought there was, for sure.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's just one field. But how long does it take to set that stuff up? It's expensive, and I mean, fracking platforms are actually quite small, as those sorts of things go.
Yeah,
it's still a blight on the countryside, though.
But they're nowhere near as bad as like thousands upon thousands of birds slaughtering windmills all over the place.
Yeah,
wind
sure.
And never mind the other idea they had of like covering whole farms with bloody solar panels. So they're not as bad as those.
Yeah, I think when I worked it out, you'd be looking at like 1,500 fracking sites in Britain could basically meet our entire domestic budget.
Wow.
Which, to be fair, when you look at the footprint of it, that actually probably makes it better than nuclear if you're taking into account just the amount of land it's taking up. But then again, nuclear has lots of other benefits.
Yeah, and it's yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to go nuclear as well, in my opinion. But I just think that you should diversify where you get your energy from, and you certainly shouldn't be dependent on getting it from one country who may, for one reason or another, turn into your enemy. That to me is obvious insanity, which is what Germany and to some degree France and Belgium and what have you have got themselves into. I mean, I've seen Belgium. There's actually there are people in Belgium who are actually saying that nation is now totally bankrupt. Oh dear.
Yeah.
Minoan is saying the cost of I presume he means fracking, is high. I don't think it's not that cheap. But there again, look at the cost of energy these days.
When you consider how cheap gas is as a commodity anyway, even with the price going up. But yeah, like the cost of actually building the fracking infrastructure is pretty damn high.
Yeah.
But then again, if you had a nice mixed market of it between shale gas, nuclear, a bit of coal, a bit of everything else.
Yes.
You could just exclusively sell shale gas back to the continent when the costs are high. It's like become the gas king of Europe. I don't know if that would actually be a viable strategy.
I just think you've got to diversify, and fracking should be part of that. But I also think Britain needs to build some more storage facilities for liquid natural gas, because apparently we have the least amount of storage of anyone in Europe.
Yeah.
So that even when we get stuff in, we can't store it.
Yeah, Minoan says the return on investment makes it unaffordable. Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm still kind of it's funny because I'm not particularly pro-nuclear, but it just seems to still make the most sense on paper. I mean, that's
Yeah,
really expensive too, but it also just gives you an extra thing that you can't really buy, which is self-sufficiency. I mean, it's not
yeah,
completely self-sufficiency, but it's sort of a big step in that direction.
yeah. And I mean, I think if Britain had a sensible policy, and if we'd have instituted a sensible policy 10 years ago, rather than going down this watermelon communist green route that we've gone down, which just doesn't work. There is no way that this renewable stuff can provide enough energy, and even when it's working well, because there's enough wind or enough sunshine, which obviously a lot of the time there isn't. There's no way of storing it. You can't store it, so it's just pointless. And that's beside the point. If you're going to be really into conservation, and I know, Adam, that you're quite pro conservation, and so am I. These wind farms, they kill thousands of birds every year.
Yeah,
Tens of thousands, and
yeah.
no one says a word about
Mm. Yeah, I mean, but like the energy sector, what does that tell you about in-group and out-group preference, right? Because is that only explained by time preference? Is it just that politicians are in and out so quick that they don't care about building up a long-term beneficial energy strategy, or is it that this crop of elites, because they are rootless and because they are very much in with the sort of mercenary attitude of the new global Britain, that they just don't care, and they benefit politically from exporting sort of British manufacturing, British self-sufficiency, British everything else,
it.
and
Well, how
taking off
much
the
do you
top.
how much do you think that the British politicians are controlled by people like the World Economic Forum, etc.,
Um,
who's been pushing the green energy thing? I mean, I think it's beyond a coincidence that all of the Western nations are doing exactly the same thing.
yeah, sure, but
That's
they
not
were
coincidental.
no, absolutely not. But they were pushing that stuff for quite a while before as well. I mean, to me, it kind of seems like the WEF has just essentially given these people a hall to meet in, so they could become more unidirectional.
Yeah, okay, that's reasonable, I suppose. To me, it's just still insanity. Because I mean, all it's going to do is lower people's standard of living, and I
Yeah,
think it's intended to do that.
yeah, it doesn't lower their standard of living.
No, they'll still be jetting around the world on their private jets. Of course they will. But we, as ordinary human beings, we're going to be expected to live in the pod and eat the bugs and not have a motor vehicle of any description, because we won't be able to afford the electric vehicles, and they don't have the range to go anywhere anyway. And also, we're already seeing this push to stop people going on flights. There's all sorts of stuff like this, if you look around, that's going on. They want to turn us into 21st century serfs, like ordinary average people. They don't want a middle class, and the inflation that we're going into is certainly going to mostly affect the middle class and their savings, which are going to evaporate very rapidly, particularly with like very high energy bills and all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's really bad.
Mm.
Mitch in the chat says we actually have LNG terminals exporting gas to Europe, but we can't store it. So we have to depend on the goodwill of the Germans, French, etc. American LNG is 10 times more costly than Russian gas. Yeah, that's about right. And also don't forget, American LNG is all coming by ship. And ship LNG is always going to be a lot more expensive than pipeline LNG for obvious reasons. But yeah, Britain can't store this stuff. I think we're going to come mightily unstuck if we're depending on the goodwill of the Germans and the French come the winter. But that's just me. I don't think they're going to be. They will have enough to give us anything anyway.
No, but of course, I think the threat he's getting at there is that if we send it there, they might not give it back when we want some of it back in return.
Yeah, I don't think they will. I
No.
don't think they will give it back. I mean, I think Europe is going to see rolling blackouts come the winter. This is going to affect the industry. It's going to affect people's jobs. And it's just going to make the economic situation, which is already horrendously bad, far worse. I mean, one of the things about this Truss government is I don't think there's a chance in hell that she'll get re-elected in 2 years' time. None. I think it would take more than a miracle for that to happen.
Yeah.
She's going to be kicked out on her rear end in 2 years' time, because the next 2 years are going to be bloody awful.
Yeah. I mean, George said to me, he said, I take the view that the elites generally think of headlines and say, oh, that's nice. Net zero is a great idea. They then forget what it takes and everyone pays for it. Well, funnily enough, I actually saw an article maybe a month ago. I didn't get a chance to look into the specifics behind it, but it basically said that net zero had been slapped down in a high court judgment of some description, because there was literally nothing laid out to explain how they were actually going to get to it.
Yeah, look, the point is that the emissions of nations like Britain and Australia are already so low that cutting them to zero in world terms will make absolutely no difference whatsoever. Effectively, nothing. And the same goes really for Germany and France, etc. Unless you're going to do something about nations like China and India and Indonesia and many other so-called developing nations, that might make some difference if you're a believer in man-made climate change, which I'm not totally, but and if you believe that man-made climate change is really making such a huge difference to the world, and again, I don't really, but even if you totally believe that stuff, cutting countries like Britain and Australia, which already produce very few emissions, to zero is going to make no difference on a world scale. It's just going to impoverish their people.
Yeah.
And give them a worse standard of living in all respects.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, you've only got to look at, again, in Group Outgroup reference, right? You've got Sunak, who is not only foreign anyway, but literally had a green card to America.
Yeah.
So they don't see this country as something to go down with, like going down with the ship. They see it purely as a mercenary outpost to come in, make money, and leave. And I saw a lot of grotesque language about this recently from like the new Tory cabinet members, and I just thought, like, they really will not be shifted. They've learnt nothing. They won't. They know that they can just keep going the way they are, and they won't move, because they were broadly saying stuff like, oh, people come in here and doing financially well for the country, and these are the success sources, these are the success stories, blah blah blah. And it's like, all those guys coming over on boats could well be doctors and aviation engineers and everything else, but the social damage would still be happening, right?
Yeah.
The deracination of communities, the breakup of British culture.
Apparently, they're mostly Albanians, is what we're hearing these days.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's true. It could be, though.
That's what I keep hearing, is they're mostly Albanians, and I mean, there's no war in Albania, so why they're refugees, I don't know.
Well, there's no war in France either. But
yeah, exactly. But then I watched a video the last week, I think it was, that something like 75% of the so-called refugees in Sweden go home on holiday. They go back to where they came from on holiday. I mean, it's just utterly ludicrous. If you're a refugee, how can you go back there on holiday?
Yeah, someone's tagged you in the chat.
I was just going to point out, Cool Chicken says, and this is the core: out-group versus in-group. The whites are the out-group. Yeah, these days I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
Is that the one you were talking about?
Yeah, fellow, yeah.
Do you lads believe once this winter commences and civil unrest within the populace is at breaking point, would French, German, and UK governments resort to National Guard manoeuvres in law and order? Well, there's no National Guard in Britain. There is a territorial army, but such as it is these days. I am hopeful that this winter might be good for us on the real right, because I think the rioting. I don't say this is true of France and Germany, which I don't know well enough, But in Britain, I think a lot of that rioting is going to be by, shall we say, diverse populations. And again, that's going to wake up a lot of normies, I think.
I actually think that crises like this actually empower the current regime.
Maybe. I'm not
historically,
sure.
that's always been the case, and I would say that, for example, if you look at like people are even less capable of looking after themselves if the government had to withdraw from their lives for some reason than before.
No, I don't disagree with that.
So
I'm sorry, go on.
if the state can't put food on the table anymore, okay, so if the state can't put any food on the table anymore, then you've got a problem. If the state can put crumbs on your table, you can't do any better by yourself, so you'll take the crumbs. I mean, I'm not saying we will, but there are a lot of people that will.
There are some people who will, but I just think that, if there is civil unrest in Britain, and I think it's very likely there will be, it's going to be in the big diverse cities like London and Birmingham. That could be interesting, because the police won't be able to adopt the softly approach they did with the Black Lives Matter scum a year or so ago. They won't be able to do that if there are big, large scale riots. So that could be interesting.
I mean, there is, of course, the other thing that Western regimes nowadays seem very unlikely to set the military on any sort of real scale against their own people. They don't seem to like the use of force.
They won't do that in Britain, I'm quite sure.
No,
I don't think they'll do that in Britain. I'd be amazed if they did, but they might in Germany or France.
Well, this is the other thing as well. I used to be of the opinion that when you get the army to train guns on its own citizens, you've lost, because the army broadly won't do that, because you're getting, if it's the UK, you're getting Yorkshire lads to point guns at other Yorkshire people, and that's not going to work. But I will also point out that if you think back to Little Rock 9 in America, when Brown v. Board of Education, I think that's the case I'm thinking of, when forced busing came in. And they had the school at Little Rock where they were going to send blacks there, and the local populace kicked off. They deployed army on the streets, and they were like walking people down the streets at bayonet point, like literally guns raised,
but not using them.
Not using them, no, but they didn't seem to be apprehensive about it, not in the least. So
I don't know. Look, I've always argued that the British government would be very unwise to rely on British servicemen firing on real British people. A load of rioting immigrants might be a different story, frankly.
Yeah.
I certainly, if I was still in the army, it would be a different story for me. So,
Well, the thing is, when I try to talk to normies about like the state, right, and problems of dissident whatever, one of the things I always run into is I would like to bring up an example about the so-called anti-vaxxers. I say so-called because, of course, most of them aren't really against vaccines, right? They're mostly against lockdowns.
Yeah.
And yet, the moment you bring that up, most people will say, oh, well, the fact that the police set dogs on them and treated them roughly is fair game.
Yeah.
And of course, they don't actually think that, but they're saying it because the news has very much, not the news, the media generally, the total media state has very much placed these people in the outgroup category. Not so much in an actual, in a legitimate outgroup category, but they've basically said, like, these guys are traitors to the tribe, and if you don't also think so, then you're one of them. In this new sort of very binary political model that we're stuck in.
Lee Ham in the chat says there are contingency plans to use troops along with the police. They have been used in the past. It was used after the Manchester bombing. Yeah, of course, there's always contingency plans for use of the military. There always are. Because there are certain situations where they would use the military without doubt. But I think the British government would be most unwise to depend on British squaddies firing at British people. I really think that they want to be careful. Minoan says the new woke military will. The thing about this woke in the military is it tends to be very senior officers that are woke or are going along with woke policies. And the lower down the ranks you get to ordinary regimental officers, company officers, NCOs, and the soldiers, most of those guys are not very woke at all. The wokeism tends to be confined to the very senior officers. And also, if you're looking at T-farms, like the infantry, for example, who you would really need if you're going to use the military in a civil situation, those guys are not very woke. They're just not. I think that, if I was Liz Truss, I wouldn't be relying on average British squaddies firing on British people. A massive rioting immigrants might be a different story.
Yeah, I mean that is the thing, because it's so hilarious that, going back to that, the article about the white faces in the Mao, that a journalist can write that absolute drivel, that absolute screed, whilst also saying simultaneously in the back of their mind, actively trying to believe that the non-whites are just as English as anyone else.
Do they really believe that, though, Alan, or do you think they're just kidding themselves? I mean,
they've said it enough they've said it enough that they, how would you say, that they believe it in a sort of, I don't know how to put it, but that they've said it enough that they've sort of imbued it with a sort of personal truth. They think consciously it's true, but unconsciously they still move out of their area if it becomes too diverse. They still move to a lovely rural village and then say it's a great community. So it's.
Yeah, look, as far as I'm concerned, real British people are Anglo-Celtic. It's as simple as that. That is my belief, and it's never going to change. And that's why when people were paying their respects at Buckingham Palace, they were real British Anglo-Celtic people, and therefore they were white.
Yeah. I mean, I've been reading this book, Artivism, by Alexander Adams, that I picked up at the event. I quite like Alexander Adams' books anyway. This one is a cracker. So, if anyone's interested in that subject about the capture of galleries and museums, it's worth a read. It's quite short as well. But he basically points out in there's a bunch of points where he says that these institutions, even though they're kind of proactively anti-white, although he doesn't use that phrase, they are overwhelmingly white, middle class, and also majority run by women.
Yes.
And there's one instance where he points out, I forget what gallery he said it was, but they had a wall of pictures of visitors, or it might have been a visitor's book or some such, and they were taking photos of visitors, but obviously most of the visitors are white, so they were literally saying they were visitors, but they were getting in actors who were black, brown, disabled, and all sorts, just to fill up this quota that they'd set for themselves.
When I was a kid, because I was in London, I used to go to places like London Zoo and the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum, British Museum, all this kind of stuff. And the vast majority of the people you saw in those places were white.
Yeah.
Because, immigrants are basically not interested in that stuff.
Yeah. But it does. I mean, there's also a cultural component that is. I mean, again, this is another thing that I heard from Bowden again from listening to him this week. There's that bit where he says there's a racial component to culture. And I really do kind of believe that. I was thinking actually of differences that you can trace between French and English people that are in language, but are part of but are spawned out of their culture. That I won't get into now, but so for example, you've always said it's intrinsically British or Anglo-Celtic to love animals.
Yes.
And my friend, I've got a friend who works at a zoo, So I was getting there for free, and we go down there quite a lot.
Cool.
And even though that's in an area that is on an intersection between two motorways, between two cities that have diverse populations, I think in all the times I've visited there, I've only seen one black person.
Yeah, look, I go to Melbourne Zoo fairly frequently, and you don't see many not white people in there. And when I was a kid, I used to go to London Zoo. I used to go to Whipsnade. I've been to Bristol Zoo, which incidentally I was sad to see closed recently, as it was the third oldest zoo in the world, I believe. But there's always been an affinity between British people and animals. I mean, particularly dogs and horses, but I mean, animals more generally. And Britain was the first nation in the world to have decent animal protection laws.
Yeah.
Many of which, by the way, have gone by the board since immigration came across, because we have to do this stuff for all these Muslims.
Mm.
So, But yeah, I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I didn't have anything to say anyway. I just don't know. I don't really know what to make of it. But there's definitely something cultural and indeed ethnic or racial to that. I don't quite know what it is, though, or how I'd be able to identify it. Or
well, look how many British and British descent people feed birds in the garden and this kind of stuff. It's just every other person does it, or used to when I lived in England anyway. If you lived out of town a bit, where you get more than sparrows and blackbirds and starlings, but that's not the case in a lot of countries. I mean, in Spain they shoot songbirds. I mean, God knows why. I mean, what the point there is in shooting chaffinches and God knows what. I've got no idea, but
Yeah. But you do see a lot of that, like that in-group stuff, even not just in the galleries and the museums, but in the war museums too. Me and Royal Biscuits in chat went to the Imperial War Museum. It was quite a while ago, a couple of years back, I think. And they had obviously, because it's right in the centre of London, there was a school trip there, which was all like black kids, right? Because it's a local school. But beyond that, if you were just to look at the adult visitors, that was overwhelmingly white, considering you're in a city where you're a minority.
Yeah,
but of course, even there in the Imperial War Museum, they still had to have like all the displays to the brave Commonwealth soldiers.
Yeah,
of course, they're not talking about Canadians when they say that, or Australians. They're talking about
They're talking about the tiny minority of dark Commonwealth people. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, who actually fought in World War II, because of course they had no conscription. A lot of Indians fought in World War II, but they didn't have conscription even in India. They were all volunteers.
Yeah.
But the numbers who came from Africa and the West Indies, etc., were actually very small.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it was good on the ones that did come, even though they were getting paid. But it was still brave of them.
Yeah, look, if someone volunteered, good luck to them. I mean, I'm not having a go at them, but I'm just saying they were a very small minority of the British forces, particularly in Europe. But I used to go to the Imperial War Museum, I don't know, certainly monthly when I was a kid, because it was quite close to where I lived. And it wasn't like that at all then. There was, it was all about the Brits, basically. There was a little bit about the Australians, I think, and the Canadians, but it was mostly the Brits, which is what it was for, after all.
Yeah.
It was put up after World War One as a tribute to all the British soldiers, sailors, and airmen in World War One. So but I'm not surprised it's gone woke. Do they still have?
I mean, I think the it's not bad. It's definitely the least woke museum in London, but it's still pretty bad. I've heard that the other museums in like the Imperial War Museum net, like Duxford and that, are still very good.
Well, it might be because it's further up north. Yeah. I don't know that place because it didn't exist when I was a young chap in the UK. I went to the RAF museum in Hendon a few times, and that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And of course, I went down to see HMS Victory and all this kind of stuff, and I probably went on HMS Belfast at least 10 times when I was a kid. So
Yeah.
and the Tower of London, which is also partly, or used to be at least partly, a museum. But yeah, all of this stuff is being ruined. But like the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich went very woke and got rid of most of their best stuff at one stage. So apparently there's a new director there now who's partially reversed that, but not totally.
Yeah, I mean, we are actually seeing a little bit of a pushback to some of this stuff. I don't know if you've seen this new Greater Manchester Police Chief.
No.
But Greater Manchester Police was basically put into special measures because it's been doing really badly for several years now. And they've brought in this new police chief. I don't know if he's been reading Peter Hitchens' critiques on the police or something, but he's brought back like a better uniform. Like they're not sort of they've still got like radios and all that, but it's just a bit. It's a bit more.
Are they still wearing baseball caps?
I think they still have units that wear baseball caps, but they've brought back like some of the proper hats and helmets, and it's just a bit more of a uniform. And I actually really want to go back to Bovington. I haven't been there in years. That's a brilliant museum.
They've got a very good YouTube channel as well, which is well worth subscribing.
Yeah, they've got like Lindy Beige and that on there, haven't they?
He has been on there. He's been on there. Quite a lot of fairly well-known YouTubers have been on there, but they do really good deep dives into various tanks and armored fighting vehicles and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely recommend that channel on YouTube. I've been subscribed to them for years now.
Yeah. But yeah, and this so they had like their own little version of the Notting Hill Carnival up in Manchester, and this police chief turned around and said that they were going to be actively policing to make sure no one with ties to gangs gets in. So the base was basically the place was basically empty, right?
Good.
Good. But and the media tried to kick off about this, and he just didn't answer, didn't respond, didn't care. And which is how you should exercise power.
Yeah. Listen, I'm all in favor of any pushback there is. I mean, someone was saying to me about the new King Charles, and the new King Charles said he's going to be a defender of the faith, and he's going to support the Church of England. Now, the Church of England is in a right old state. I think we would all have to admit that. But there are still some based figures in the Church of England, high church figures, who don't agree with women vicars and all this kind of nonsense. And if Prince Charles says he's going to support that, I'll say great. Although I saw you posted something that he's also quite keen on Orthodox Christianity. Is that right, Adam?
Seemingly, yeah. I mean, I think George brought this up on a stream a long time ago that there was a rumor that he'd converted to Greek Orthodoxy, and I suppose that's just that rumor.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he has, because when he was doing his speech to the nation, he said he's going to be head of the Church of England.
But you don't know if he isn't just saying that because that's what he's supposed to say, or that's what he feels he should say.
Well, I look, maybe he could be privately Orthodox, but I don't think he could actually officially convert and still be head of the Church of England.
I mean, it would be a weird dynamic if, for the first time ever, we have a king who is a different religion to the people, like to the mass of the people.
Wow, how many British people are in the Church of England these days? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know, but historically, it's always been the case that.
Oh yeah, it should be it is the traditional, certainly English religion for sure. Yeah, I don't know. Look, I mean, I'm not against Orthodox people anyway. At least they're Christians, and they seem to be a bit more based than most of the Church of England, to be honest with you. So,
yeah.
But I think George is right that he cannot legally convert from the COV. Now he's king. He wouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. But the thing is, like, how would you even know?
Well, look, I mean, back in the past, you obviously had English queens like Elizabeth I, who were Protestant, but had to do it privately when her sister was on the throne, who was a Catholic, and who was burning Protestants all over the place. So, that sort of thing can happen. But I'm sure George is correct that in terms of now he's actually the head of the Church of England, so he obviously cannot convert to something else now. Not officially.
Yeah.
Not officially. I mean, what he does privately, I guess, is his own business, but he can't officially convert.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that I found even weirder, which I'm not sure what to think of, was he gave some sort of lecture by video at, I think it's the Temenos Academy. Oh no, sorry, he's a patron of the Temenos Academy, but he gave a video lecture for something called like the Sacred Web Journal, in which he was like talking about like his love of like like the works of Rene Guénon and the traditionalists. Which I don't know. It leaves me a little bit worried, but it could also be super based. But I'm not holding out on anything, you know.
Yeah,
Apparently,
look,
I heard another rumor though that he's read Abolition of Britain, and he tried to sort out
really?
a meeting with Peter Hitchens, but the people at the advisors and all that at the palace like effectively blocked it.
Well, that is interesting. I wonder if that's true. I mean, look, I know he's pretty based on some stuff like architecture and so on. So, and as I said,
he's also not based on the environment. Well, he is
no,
kind of, but you know,
yeah,
he's also aligned himself with certain people that
yes.
it won't lead him to be particularly popular in some instances.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. But well, you know, as I said on the Discord, he used to be the captain of a Royal Navy minesweeper, and he was very popular with the crew. And that is quite telling because the skipper of a warship is still a little god, and if he's not a nice man, that you know that the crew would know about it. And British warship crews are not behindhand on saying what they think about people, including royals. And apparently, he was very popular. His crew considered him a nice bloke. So, you know, look, I'm prepared to give him a chance. He's my king. So, you know, let's give the bloke a chance. He's only just got the job.
Yeah.
I'm not hopeful. You know, I'm not enthusiastic. I'm not thinking, oh, he's going to be really based. But I'm certainly prepared to give him a chance.
Yeah.
So we will see. But I mean, that's coming dangerously close to like breaking out no politics on the Queen until after her funeral. So trust me, guys. After the Queen is buried, we will indeed the next SI or the one after that. We will certainly talk about the political stuff that went on during Queen Elizabeth's reign. But I just think it would be not respectful to talk about it now when the woman's not even been buried. So yeah. But yeah, I'm a royalist. Like I'm not Republican of any description. So long as anything that stops someone like Liz Truss being the head of state, I'm all in favour of it. You know,
I'm a restorationist now. That's my official title.
Yeah,
after Rupert's speech.
Yeah, I've long said I bring back the Plantagenets, but again, but we'll see. But yeah. Look, you know, I still find it strange to like say king, but you know,
yeah.
Not many people alive today who can remember when Queen Elizabeth wasn't queen. So you
know. Yeah, my grandmother was 8 when she was coronated.
Yeah, my father was in the army in Egypt, and they did a bloody great parade in the Suez Canal zone for a coronation in 1952. So, which he used to tell me about because it was quite funny about some things went wrong, shall we say? But yeah, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But I think we owe it to we owe it to the king to give him a chance. He hasn't done anything particularly bad so far, so you know. And I knew that there were people saying before that you know he was going to be defender of the faiths and all this sort of stuff. Well, he knocked that on the head pretty quickly. So.
He did openly talk about that previously because they even got to the point where they were trying to work out how to write it so that it translates into Latin properly for the Catholics. So that was on the cards, but obviously he's dropped it at some point in between.
Yes. Yes. Someone I was reading somewhere the other day, like yesterday, I think, was saying that at some point he's gone back to some more traditional ideas about religion and so on, but I don't know how true
Yeah.
that
Well,
is.
look, I mean, the monarchy's always going to be at least semi-based in some way or another, even if they're decadent and in their late stages and a bit weak, because they're your people, they're part of your in-group, to get back to that
Yes,
subject.
absolutely right. Yes, I mean, and they represent the history of Britain in many respects. I mean, how do we look at British historical eras? Well, it's by the kings and queens. So, it's you can't get, as a British person, you really just have to give the king a chance because he is our king. So, and like I said, I'm no sort of Republican. I will never support Republicans. I mean, in Australia, a few of the Republicans have come out of the woodwork, but not many. But a few have. But the thing I notice is that they're invariably lefties. They're almost invariably the same people who want like a special Aboriginal parliament and this, that, and the other, and basically they're to bring it back to the in-group and out-group again. They're people who are anti-white again, for the most part.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's that. I wanted to ask you something, Adam. I was watching a show by AA when he was talking about the event, and he and one or two of the other chaps who were talking about some bad behaviour at the event. What the hell was this?
I didn't see. I'm not sure if I should really talk about it, but the
I mean, obviously,
naming
no names, just
unpopular opinions
general.
live that I've been told didn't happen. So maybe I imagined it, but there was quite a bit of spicy behaviour during that. And I did also on the Saturday morning. I was sitting there with Nathan Hood after breakfast before we went over for the first talk, and I think it was Saturday morning, we were chatting about something. And there was a couple of guys over on the other table. Bearing in mind, there's like hotel staff and that around, and they're very loudly discussing the JQ. And I was like, it's a bit much,
Yes.
No wonder they were asking like what exactly the event was about.
Yeah, what you mean the hotel staff?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. That's pretty.
But it was pretty minimal. I thought it was fine. I mean, I kind of went into it thinking like, wouldn't it be cool if we had like a far right roaming frat house? And to be honest, it wasn't far off that.
Yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, I just wondered what he was talking about.
Yeah, there was. Spindley says he thought there was some salutes. I will not confirm. There were some salutes, and not by the people you'd probably expect.
Right.
So, but we'll leave it at that. But it was said in humour, so it was done in humour. But the media wouldn't care.
No, of course they wouldn't. The media wouldn't care at all. And I mean, that's exactly the sort of event that you're going to try and the media will try and like get somebody into if they can.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's not. It's like honestly, it's just foolishness for people to do that sort of stuff. It's like we were saying earlier on in the stream. Yes, by all means, we need to stretch that Overton window a bit beyond what our elites would like it to be, because that's very, very narrow and basically anti-white these days. But there's a difference between doing that and then simply shooting yourself in the foot and handing yourself over to like groups like Hope Not Hate. You know what I mean? It's just silliness.
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of people like to do this whole, you've got to step over, and they're gonna insult you anyway. Yeah, they are. They are gonna attack you and say these things about you anyway.
But don't make their job easier.
I mean, stepping over. A good example of stepping over is when you're insulting someone who deserves to be insulted, and they say, "What if people find that offensive?" And you just say, "Well, yeah, okay, be offended. I don't care." That would be an example of like positively stepping over.
Yeah, absolutely right. If someone calls me a racist, I laugh. I just do. But there's a difference between doing that and like basically handing yourself on a plate to your enemies.
Yeah,
and making it just totally easy for them, which is ridiculous. That's lacking in common sense. It really is. People have got to use more common sense than this, and particularly if you're going to go to live events and so on, you've got to show a little bit more common sense.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like, it was basically nothing. I think he's blowing it up a little bit, but you know, he probably just wants to keep a handle on it or whatever.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, the people actually running the event seemed to not have many issues with what was going on. Otherwise, they would have said, because they were quite on the ball. So
yeah, fair enough. But yeah, so they didn't do there was no live Q&A thing.
There was, but we don't talk about it.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Because like the last one, I know that they put a lot of videos out last time, and they haven't this time. The only one I've seen is the one that the chicks put out.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, at least there were some women there apparently.
Oh yeah. There was actually a few that just came up by themselves, just
cool.
You know, from the community, which was cool, and they were nice enough people. So.
Yeah, I think George is making a good point, and I think it was the Traditionalist on a stream the other day who said this. Basically, don't do stuff either online or in real life that your granny would be ashamed for your granny to see. Just don't do it.
Yeah, that's pretty good barometer, actually. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, my grandmother, because I went round hers before I went up there, and so she thought it was all really cool and interesting that I had, you know, that I was going to this event, and they had this little, you know, you know, this cool little logo, and I was like dressed up nice, you know, in a suit, and you know, little did she know I went there to sit at a table, get drunk, sing SS themes, and throw up Romans. That wasn't what I'm doing, by the way. I'm just saying hypothetically. But
yeah. No, absolutely. George is correct, and Prudentialist was correct when he said it. You know, don't do stuff that would make you'd be ashamed for your granny to see. I mean, if you don't do that, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, people have got to use common sense. And again, comes back to bring this back to the in-group and out-group thing. Like one of the things about the Anglo-Celtic people in particular, but also I'd say this is true of Western Europeans and European descent people in general, is that we generally are reasonably well behaved.
Yeah.
And behave in a reasonably intelligent manner. You know, it's like, so, you know, don't portray your ancestors.
Yeah. Yeah, and like Spindley said, don't give the enemy a headshot opening. Like, yeah, well, this is the thing. Like, a lot of people like to just say, "Oh, OPSEC's pointless." You know, the idea of optics generally is pointless because they're going to say this, that, and the other about you either way. The thing that I think some people miss is that when they say something about you that the regular person on the street can't see, right? That weakens them.
Yes.
Right. When they're calling you a racist for saying it's okay to be white, and the regular person on the street cannot in their mind correlate how someone can get, you know, the term racist from that.
Absolutely.
That's a win, right? So OPSEC, when it comes to creating situations like that and protecting yourself from those easy losses, is what we need to be going for.
Well, I mean, look at the video of that event that bloody glow in the dark fella did in America. What's his name? Stephen. Can't remember his name. He's gone very normie and globalist these days. Richard Spencer. The video of all those guys giving Roman salutes at that event did him immense harm.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he turned around and said, "Oh, it was all a joke, blah, 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 blah." But it's not all a joke. It just hands you to the enemy.
He built himself up as a comic book villain, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. It was an idiot thing to allow. I think he did it himself even, didn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember specifically. He might not have done, but
it's been a while since I've seen the clip. But
he did say "Hail Trump." So.
Yeah, hail victory and blah and blah. Yeah, some victory we've had there, haven't we? Yeah. Well. And these days he's trying to walk it all back and be Mr. Normie and pro-EU and all the rest of it, you know.
Yeah.
But it's right.
A Fran said, "I'm stepping over Granny."
Well, I could step over my grannies because they're dead because I'm 57. But you know.
Spindley said, "Did any of you see the Times article about Ayatollah, a British right-wing YouTuber?" Apologies if I mentioned it. We did talk about it last week.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean that was appalling. I don't watch Ayatollah. Like, I never really liked him because of because he used to, when he was on was it Absolute State of Britain was the podcast they used to do.
Yes, I think
They
so.
used to do a lot of like eternal Anglo posting on there, which I don't really appreciate.
Same.
But like on that stream, it's mostly comedy stuff. Like the actual like political stuff is actually pretty minimal most of the time. He just seems to spend, making impersonations and joking about sort of cultural analysis and stuff. But yeah, it is sad what happened to him, and I think even if we don't particularly watch him or like him, he still kind of deserves the support just because he's one of us. He's part of our in-group.
Yeah, I look. One of the things that I have certainly come to the conclusion, like over the last few months, is like punching right is something we should avoid doing as much as possible. I try not to do that. That doesn't mean I'm going to like somebody like Mark Collette, because I'm not. But I don't talk about him much anyway. In general terms, I'm not interested in slagging off other people on the right. I'm just not interested in doing that.
Yeah.
There's enough of the lefties who are doing that, and I'm not going to help them.
But that's exactly the thing, though, isn't it? Like if you, I like riding bicycles, right? I like my bicycles. It's quite a divisive thing, though. A lot of people hate it, and I'm not gonna like slag off another cyclist in front of a really anti-cycling car driver. But I might have a word with him, if I was in that sort of position, let's say, hypothetically.
Yeah, I see what you're saying entirely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Publicly, we shouldn't be washing dirty laundry in public any more than we have to.
Yeah.
If someone comes out with something which I think is really, really bad, I'm not going to pretend that I think that's right. But I'm not going to spend a great deal of time slagging people off because they may do some things or have some views that I don't share. So I just don't think there's any point in that. We have enough enemies.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have enough enemies, and I know, some time ago, probably 2-3 years ago now, you and I and some others were doing the 37 thing, and I'm still basically a supporter of the 37 words and what have you. I'm not against any of it. I don't go back on any of it. But we spent quite a lot of time slagging off other people back then, which I really, looking back on it, probably wasn't worth it. Although it might have been needed at the time a little bit, perhaps, because there was a lot of supposed nationalism in Britain, which was not very British nationalist. I mean, one of the reasons I started this channel off is it's a British and Old Commonwealth channel for the most part. We have a few Americans and one or two Americans and what have you in my Discord, but overwhelmingly it's British and Old Commonwealth. It's Brits, Australians, Canadians, a few Irish guys, etc. That's why I started it, because I'm an Anglo-Celtic nationalist. I'm not a white nationalist. I never have been. But that doesn't mean to say I'm anti-white nationalist. I'm not. If German nationalists or French nationalists or Finnish nationalists, I don't care. If those guys are going forward, good luck to them. And I'm not going to attack them. But I'm an Anglo-Celtic nationalist myself.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of, I think this is something the Distributist touches on, where he kind of says that, white it was actually kind of a leftist term. Like they were universalizing different groups together into one sort of amorphous blob. I've kind of liked it's really a bit silly and autistic, but I have kind of liked AA going off on the Irish on Twitter, basically saying they're not white. And going by this old distinction, someone posted up that video. It's like a clip from Family Guy, where he is, where they're sort of like pretended to be like the settlers, and they land on their boat, and they're going, oh, it'll be a land where everyone's equal, but only white people, and only white people from this area, only white people from England, Scotland, and Ireland, and only people from certain parts of Ireland and Scotland.
Look, my mother was Irish, although her father was actually a Welshman. But I think there are good and bad Irishmen, as with all groups of people, and there are some good Irishmen. We've got a couple of good Irishmen in our discourse. So
yeah, they're white.
Yes, absolutely they are. But yeah, like I said, I did this general white nationalism. I mean, what the hell does it even mean?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'll be honest. I always kind of find white nationalism to be quite low energy. I always describe myself as an Anglo supremacist.
Well, I think where it comes from is in America, really, because American white people are so mixed these days.
Yeah.
Most of them anyway, not all of them, but most of them are.
But someone did actually point out to me quite recently that even in England we use the distinction white long before it appeared in America.
Yeah, I suppose.
So it's not purely American, although it has in recent times a lot of it's come out of America.
What I'm trying to say is I think that's where your white nationalism comes from.
Yeah,
is because in America that's the easiest shorthand to use, I guess. I mean, what are you going to do other than that? The only other thing you can say is European descent nationalism.
Yeah.
Because most Americans are a mixture of various people from Europe. So there's that. And I mean, in British terms, people used to talk about the British race, but when people talked about the British race in the 19th century, they included Australians and Canadians and New Zealanders in that, and also a lot of South Africans. So,
Yeah.
So that was, the British race was a thing. I tend to say Anglo-Celtic these days because, as far as I'm concerned, all British people are Anglo-Celtic. There's some sort of mixture of Anglo-Celtic.
I still think there is something in the whole sort of a white identifier, even in Europe. I've gone to Germany quite a few times. I really love the place. And I love the people, but it has noticeably gone downhill just in the last sort of 10 years. You could really feel the decline between about 3 visits, particularly that were about 4 years apart. You could feel a serious decline just in that 4-year span, which was a real crying shame. And it's like there are cultural differences born out of ethnicity between Brits and Germans. But it is narrow, and it's so narrow that the difference between, there's an instance where I was walking down a street in Wurzburg with a German guy, and who was helping me find a place. And, we stuck together because there was a gang of immigrants loitering about at the end of the street, So are Europeans going to punch each other occasionally? Yeah, but when faced with this outsider, that should be probably partially set to one side. That said, I'm still not going to put up with the Irish posting the stuff they've been doing on Twitter the last couple of days.
Yes, totally agree. And that's the same thing. Look, who was it? Spindley was saying that Southern Europeans are off-white. I'm not even sure I would agree with that, to be honest. As far as I'm concerned, Greeks are white, really.
I mean, I remember
once Italians are certainly white. I mean, if you go to Northern Italy, you get loads of blonde Italians in Northern Italy.
Yeah, I mean, I was arguing with someone quite a few years ago now, and the whole thing like where she brought up like, oh, what even is a white person? That old chestnut, and
Yeah,
she was like, oh, you've obviously never been to Spain, and I was like, well, actually, I've been to Spain and Italy a lot, and the truth is, visually, someone like her could not tell the difference if you put, let's say, 5 Barcelonans and 5 Berliners in a room together.
yeah, absolutely. I've been to Spain, same thing. I've been to Greece as well, and I've been to Italy. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, they're all white people. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you take, like if you go to, let's say, southern Italy, there's a point where, especially once you go south of like Napoli,
mm.
you will start to see a few more people who you could describe as swarthy, right? Because some
Oh,
of
for
the
sure.
admixture
Yeah,
from invasions and that a long time ago. They're on the periphery, but they're close enough, and a majority of that population down there is still looks white, right?
yeah,
In any
yeah.
real sense.
I've been to Crete, which is I think the most southerly part of Greece, and yeah, some Cretans are swarthy, but not all of them are. And as far as I'm concerned, they're still Europeans,
Hmm. Yeah.
But certainly, if you're going to talk about Spain, I mean, if you're going to talk about people like the what are they called around Barcelona? What are the people around Barcelona? Because they're not
Oh,
the
Catalonians.
Catalonians. Yeah, the Catalonians are often quite fair.
Hmm.
So yeah, again, Basques. Yeah, I'd say they're
Oh
also
yeah, I mean,
Europeans.
I've seen so many blonde-haired, blue-eyed people in Basque. It's unreal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're
And
not
like
all like that, but there are a lot down there. It's kind of
yeah,
it's kind of a bit weird.
and Northern Italy is exactly the same.
Yeah. Oh
You,
yeah.
you,
Like I remember, like when I was going around, I think was it Bolzano? I can't remember the name of the town. Um, and I was kind of speaking to people in my little bit of broken German that I knew because people kept speaking to me in German, and
mhm.
then I went to speak to this police officer, and I've gone, oh, guten Morgen, and he's like turned and very fiercely pointed at the Italian flag on his sleeve, and I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, love the place, but
Yeah, yeah. Oh, look, we have much more in common with these people in Europe than we do with people from other parts of the world. That's for sure.
mm,
A German can move to UK, or a British person can move to Germany, and they're not going to have massive, providing they can speak the language, they're not going to have massive cultural problems.
yeah, yeah,
So that goes without saying. And I mean, the Anglo bit of the Anglo Celts are originally of Germanic stock. I mean, the English are mostly originally Germanic.
mm,
So
yeah,
I'm not against that. And again, bringing it back to in groups and out groups, which is like the main topic of the stream tonight. Um, I'm not going to call a German an out group in most respects.
no,
He's an out group if you're just talking about Anglo Celts, but he's not an out group if you're talking about like Europeans generally.
no, no, not at all. And again, like I mean, I say, oh, not a white nationalist, some this, that, and the other. Obviously, to like our enemy, they don't distinguish. It's the same. So it doesn't really
Yeah,
matter what label
yeah,
you take.
they hate all of us, particularly if you're a straight white bloke.
Yeah, but in these circles, I will differentiate because we can have a conversation about that, and it's and we all kind of accept the same presuppositions, so it's kind of easy to that was something someone else said quite recently, that actually echo chambers are the places where you can have discussions. I'm not sure if I'd phrase it that way, but there's definitely something to the fact that especially when it comes to our enemies, this idea that we can have some sort of debate is just grotesquely um, just wrong. You can't, because like you said in the who is it, fellow Ethelred.
Mm.
The what is white is just a distraction. Yeah, it is. They no conversation they have with you is going to be in good faith like 99%
No,
of the time. So
absolutely, of course it's not. JB is saying the English are mostly Briton Celt, not Anglo-Saxon. I don't think that's true. There we go. There are bits of England that are, like Cornwall is mostly Celt. Wales is quite largely Celt, but like the majority of England is Anglo-Saxon actually, which is I mean there are Celt people in England, of course there are.
I think more recent studies they found that, I mean, this is kind of an interesting one as well, because in more recent studies they found that there isn't actually as much Anglo-Saxon DNA as they previously thought in like the average Briton.
I haven't looked at this in a while, but like when the last time I did look at it, like except in some areas, like I say, like in the west of England and Wales, it was more Anglo-Saxon than it was Celtic. Which is not to say there's no Celtic, because of course there is Celtic DNA in most people, and obviously there are also plenty of Celtic people who moved to England from other parts of the British Isles. So
Yeah. I mean, I'll have to dig up the study, but they've definitely said that they like, as they've studied it again, they found that there's a lot less Anglo-Saxon DNA than they previously thought. But the Anglo-Saxons had a huge sort of outward cultural dissemination. So you kind of end up with this kind of weird mixed bag that we've got now, which is interesting and worthy of a million TV shows, movies, and museum pieces, which it won't get until we win.
No, it certainly won't. No, all you'll get is black people playing white people, historical white people, and pretending that early English people were black.
Yeah. Nathan Hood in the chat says evening. Yeah, his stream the other night with Apostolic Majesty was great. People should go check that out. Talking about Tolkien lore.
Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, it was good. I always watch Apostolic Majesty's stuff on Tolkien, and I know he's done quite a lot of stuff with Nathan Hood. I'm just trying to find where he is in the chat. I will say to JB, I'm not an FNAT, mate. If you think I'm an FNAT, you're completely wrong. I'm not. I'm an Anglo-Celtic nationalist for sure, but I'm not an FNAT. Like an FNAT is somebody who wants UK to be 100% white, and I don't think that's realistic. I'd like it to be 90% white. I think that.
I don't think you have to think 100% to be an FNAT. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, if you went even like Mark Caleb kind of says like 95% or whatever it is, he said he might be even lower than that.
My aim would be like 90%, which I think might be something we could achieve. And I would be happy with that. I don't know what Japan is in terms of ethnic Japanese, but I think it's like 95%, isn't it? Something like that.
Very high.
Yeah.
Comparative to us.
Yeah, I mean, if we could get somewhere like where Japan is, that would be great as far as I was concerned. But I'm not strictly speaking an FNAT.
Oh, Northumberland, 93%. Oh, that sounds beautiful.
What Northumberland is someone saying?
I'm not sure actually. Yeah, I mean the thing is, I mean even that, like, how do you get to that? That's a tough conversation of itself. But I have been more convinced. I think this was an argument George used to make, but I have been more convinced by this idea that you can essentially go down a sort of economic line of sort of disincentivizing certain things, and I think also culturally, you can push English culture or British culture, depending on the region, obviously, and people that just don't gel with that will probably look elsewhere if they're also not getting economic handouts essentially.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you've got to do it in a civilized manner, and I mean the first thing you've got to do is stop mass immigration. If you don't do that, then nothing else is going to happen. And
we can't even do that at the moment. So.
Yeah, we can't even stop illegal immigration at the moment. Never known the mass legal immigration, which is actually a far bigger problem. You've got to stop that first, and that's the main thing we've got to concentrate on. I think in terms of stuff that we push for is you've got to get a real right of centre party, which is committed to ending mass immigration. And if we get that, then all other things can flow from that. But unless you get that, nothing else is going to happen. I mean, you know, we've also got to push for increased birth rates amongst Anglo-Celtic people. That's a fact too. But it's you know, without stopping mass immigration, none of this is going to make any difference.
Yeah, I want to get the book from the event to go back through Radlib's talk, because he covered some interesting stuff surrounding this, but of the Roman Empire.
Well, if you get that, then please bring it on a stream, and we'll do a stream about it.
Yeah,
that might be quite interesting. I wouldn't mind. I quite like Radlib. He seems quite a sensible dude, and he's also a father of a football team, apparently. So,
yeah, might as well be.
Yeah. So, which is good. I mean, yeah, I'm not against that. All right, guys. We've been going an hour and 45. Did you have any final things you wanted to bring up at all, Adam?
No. The point I was going to try and remember hasn't come to me, so maybe have to bring it up on another stream.
Yeah. Well, you can always bring up anything you want to bring up, basically. I would just like to say to people, some people will have been expecting to see my second stream with Ataman and Horace on British policy in the 1930s and the early years of World War II, and we had to cancel it because Horace wasn't available. And so what we've done is we're going to do it in 2 weeks' time. So it'll be on a Thursday, but in 2 weeks. So it should have been this Thursday, and on the day Horace got hold of me and said he couldn't do it. Not his fault at all. Nothing. It wasn't anything to do anything about. And so therefore we will do that in 2 weeks' time on a Thursday. So and that will be part 3 of that stream, and probably the final part, because I think we'll get up to 1942. Other than that, we will be back next week for Splendid Isolation number 89. Please remember to like the stream, dudes, if you would be so kind, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because we are approaching 1,000 subscribers. So we get a few more, that'll be good. Thanks for joining me, Adaman, and as always, I'm going to play us out the tune.
Yeah, no problem. Always a pleasure.
Some talk of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander and such great names as these. But of all the world's great heroes, there's none that can compare with the toll to the British Grenadiers. The novels, ancient heroes, a sword, cannonball, or knew the force of powder to slay their foes withal. But Aubrey to know it can banish all their feet with a toll, row to the British Grenadiers. Whenever we're commanded to storm the palisades, our leaders march with fuses and we with hand grenades. We throw them from the glasses above the enemy's heat, sing row to the British Grenadiers. And when the siege is over, we to the town repair. The townsmen cry, hurrah, boys, here comes a grenadier. Here come the grenadiers, my boys, who know no doubts or fears. With a toll, row to the British Grenadiers. Then let us fill a bumper and drink a health to those who carry caps and pouches and wear the low-paid clothes. May they and their commanders live happy all the years, with a toll, roll, 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 to the British Grenadiers.
And that was, of course, the full version of the British Grenadiers. From an excellent channel, Patriotic Archive. If you're into patriotic and traditional music, please go and check out Patriotic Archive's channel. It's well worth a look. Thank you again, Adam, for joining me this evening. Thanks to all the audience who watched us, and we will see you next week. Go well, guys.
Yeah, good night all.